So is the David prophecy, is that one that you feel like you have a pretty good grasp on of why it's not?
Oh,
true?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you explain that real quick? Because I know that's one that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, that's a critical teaching because I would say that's the one that's most straightforward that they use to explain why Ahnsahnghong is second coming Christ. Because in the prophecy of, just like in a short summary, what they teach is that just as King David, he was 40 years old when he became king, he was 30 years old when he became king, and he was king for 40 years, right? In the same way, they say Jesus is to receive David's throne, right? So Jesus, he must be spiritually anointed at age 30, and then he must do his ministry for 40 years. So Jesus, he was baptized at age 30, or it says about 30. He was baptized at age 30, and then he only did his ministry for 3 years because he was crucified. So they teach there's 37 years remaining unfulfilled, and that's where Ahnsahnghong comes in, because they say that he was baptized at age 30 in 1948, and he preached for exactly 37 years, they say, from 1948 until his death in 1985. But there are so many inconsistencies with that. First, there's no proof that he was baptized in 1948. No proof. And the church, the only proof they say they have is that he allegedly wrote down in his alleged Bible that he was baptized in 1948.
Really?
No proof that that's his Bible, no proof that's his handwriting, and no proof of a record of being baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1948.
Okay.
And then when I asked them that question, their response was, "Oh, all the records were destroyed in a fire."
Nice.
And I was like, "Oh, well, do you have documentation of that fire?" And they know.
No.
And then, but there is a record of an Ahnsahnghong who was born on January 13th, 1918, which is the same date that their Ahnsahnghong was born, right? That he was actually baptized, and this is a record in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that this Ahnsahnghong was the same birthday as their Ahnsahnghong, was baptized actually in 1954.
Wow.
And
I've seen a picture of that document.
Yeah, this Ahnsahnghong was also married to a Huang Wansoon. Which is so.
What are the odds?
I mean, and there's pictures of the original document and what exact church it's located in.
Wow.
So
what you're basically saying is it's not just that there's not like documentation or evidence that he was baptized in 1948, but there's a lack of evidence that he was, but there is actual documentation that he wasn't.
Yeah.
That he was baptized in the 50s,
but
right?
The reason why that's significant is because he died in 1985, right? So from 1985 minus 1948 equals 37 years. So if he was baptized in 1954, that means he didn't preach the gospel for 37 years. Okay. So that's the first problem with it. Second problem is, so they teach that the sure sign by which we can recognize the spiritual King David, which is the second coming Christ, is that he must establish the everlasting covenant, which they teach is the Passover. But funny thing is King David never kept the Passover in the Bible because it says it wasn't until the time of King Josiah that they celebrated the Passover. So King David, he never celebrated the Passover. And then also, furthermore, the verse they use to show that the David must bring the everlasting covenant is Isaiah 55, verse 3. And God actually says that he will give us the everlasting covenant, his faithful love promised to David. God never said he'd give the everlasting. In that verse, he says he will give it to us.
It's Isaiah 55, right?
Yeah, Isaiah 55, verse 3. And so how the church explains that is that God will give us the everlasting covenant, which they teach as the Passover, through King David. But that's not what that verse says.
Dang.
So
they're just, it's a lot of implying. They read the text, and then they say, see? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, there's just so many issues with that it's hard to not just...
Right.
Just kind of laugh it off.
Where it's gone wrong.
Yeah.
I think one of the main things, like what I thought of immediately, when you get into the very beginning of that argument of the prophecy, and it's founded upon this assumption that, well, because David was king for 40 years, therefore Jesus has to or Christ must preach for 40 years. Well, first off, why?
Yeah.
Like why even go beyond that? Like,
right.
what?
There's
Like,
no connection
prove that to
between
me.
him being king and then Jesus' ministry.
Yeah.
There's no connection.
Like, don't just tell me that's the case. Like you could go and find, well, David did other things for another length of time. So does that mean, like, or what about Moses? Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years. So that means the Christ must not preach for the first 40 years of his life. Like, what? Like, how are you making that connection?
Which points in somebody's life that they want to fit with Ahnsahnghong's life.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that because I know many people struggle with the prophecies, like the David prophecy. It's like, and with all these prophecies, it's like if you actually just stop and don't let them catch you and just take you in their whirlwind to the point where you just get past the foundation that they started on, like just stop at the foundation and just ask that simple question. Okay, this argument is based upon the idea that since David reigned for 40 years, therefore Jesus or Christ must preach for 40 years. Just ask the simple question, why?
Yeah.
Prove that to me. Before you go on any farther, prove to me that is what Christ must do in order to be Christ. Where is that in the Bible?